Hello, and welcome to another episode of Advanced Manufacturing Live. Please remember to like and subscribe to our feed. I'm SME Media's editor-in-chief, Steve Plumb,
And I'm senior editor Michael McConnell.
and we're very pleased today to be joined by Avi Reichental, CEO of the venture capital group Exponential Works and Quickparts, which specializes in on-demand manufacturing services for both traditional and additive manufacturing, or 3D printing. In fact, Avi is a pioneer in additive manufacturing, having previously served as the president and CEO of 3D Systems. And in 2013, he was named one of the top 50 business leaders by Fortune magazine, and also was one of Popular Mechanics' top 25 makers reinventing the American dream. Avi, welcome to the show. It's good to see you again.
Good to be here, Steve, and I can only add to that with all the accolades of a lifetime of work, still a disappointment to my mother.
I don't know if that's true, but certainly a lot's changed since the last time we talked at Rapid Plus TCT a few years ago, both in the manufacturing industry, the world at large, and for you personally. So, for people not familiar with Quickparts, can you give us a quick overview of the company?
Yeah, as you said, Quickparts is a company that specializes in rapid advanced manufacturing solutions for traditional and additive manufacturing. Today, primarily powering the entire product continuum, the entire product life cycle from an idea to manufacturing and beyond, and specializing primarily in aerospace, defense, medtech, and in industrial applications where we can help our customers unlock the full benefit of what they're trying to do. What we typically tell customers, Steve, is then when others walk away from complexity or try to convince customers that what they want to do cannot be done, we double down, lean in, and try to unlock the full functionality of what our customers are trying to do. Company's been around, believe it or not, for 35 years, so this is not our first rodeo. And from the inception, we've always solved complex manufacturing problems, starting in prosthetics and in things like precision investment castings. And today we participate in some of the most mind-blowing programs that you can imagine, from putting parts on missions to that are part of Artemis 2, particularly rocket engines, to improving the quality of implants and organ preservation and replacement, and of course a lot in high-end automotive and transportation, and lately in matters of national security like ballistics and others. So our folks get up in the morning and they know that what they do is mission critical, both in improving humanity and the planet.
Avi, you have a really interesting background that Steve talked about in his intro. How was your experience in 3D printing, especially with scaling it up and the competitiveness and consolidation that's going on in the industry? How has that helped you in your new role at Quickparts and in contract manufacturing?
Yeah, everything that has to do with developing manufacturing tools at scale, and I look at 3D printing in all of its variants as tools in the toolbox for our customers, is helpful. Certainly, spending a couple of decades in the industry and pioneering and scaling 3D systems at a time for over 12 years gave me the opportunity to visit thousands of manufacturing environments and to meet with thousands of leaders, not just CEOs, but CTOs and heads of manufacturing, and look at some of the most challenging mission critical applications. that helps a lot in a few ways. One is you realize what you need to bring in terms of a mindset to being a problem solver and to being a good partner to your customers. And certainly that helps me a great deal in shaping Quickparts to be the partner that takes you all the way from an idea to production and aftermarket. But it also helps us realize on a daily basis that there isn't a single magic tool that's going to solve all of our manufacturing and nowadays more critically supply chain problems, and that to be an effective partner in design and manufacturing, and now even some assembly work, which we also do, you need to understand what is the best tool for the problem to be applied for our customer. And the benefit of having a company that specializes in precision manufacturing and primarily in key segments like aero defense, medtech, transportation, and so on, is that we are not forcing the customer to accept an additive, subtractive, or injection or die casting solution. We are curating the right set of solutions for the customer. And in many instances, we end up combining solutions. We're in the middle of a very large confidential project for a luxury automotive customer in which we've combined every tool in our toolbox to be able to deliver at scale a limited series luxury automobile. And that's, I think, the advantage that companies like Quickparts have, because we're not invested in a particular tool. We're invested in assembling all of our subject matter expertise and bringing them for the benefit of the customer.
I learned something new today about your role in Artemis 2. That's exciting. And talking about complexity, I imagine that had its own set of complexities. How are you able to leverage what you do in terms of like the luxury automobile program versus an Artemis 2?
Well, in some instances, with a program like the Artemis 2, we get to leverage decades of experience, particularly in areas like precision investment castings, in which Quickparts has pioneered back in the days together with 3D Systems, pioneered and is one of the leading users of the quick cast process. And so in instances like that, when you need to create highly complex, highly functional geometries, from call it exotic alloys and metals, we can bring to bear decades of experience. In the area of luxury automobiles, it becomes, believe it or not, more challenging than going to space. Because of the need to combine and bring together a composite of solutions, some of them within the motor coach, some of them within functional parts, interior, exterior, including collision absorption and bumpers and things like that. So the set of problems that we get to solve and provide for, and the level of call it on your feet innovation, kind of in real time, trying to decode the intent of a highly sophisticated, gifted design leader that wants to bring their design thinking into a limited series luxury automobile is a lot harder than building rocket engines to go to space, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So there's a growing number of tools in the toolbox for manufacturers. And even though additive manufacturing has been around now for 35 years. It's really just starting to pick up steam in production, and especially volume production applications. Did either of the programs you just referenced use additive?
So in the case of taking people to space and participating in the creation of a permanent space station on the moon and beyond, additive in combination with the downstream foundry work that's required are the two magic processes that unlock the capability to do that. So it's very much additive enabled. In the case of luxury automobiles and in many instances medical devices, it could be a combination. As I mentioned, in the case of the luxury automobile, it's a combination of every process that we have within our 5 wholly owned facilities and the 50 in network certified manufacturing partners that we have to be able to bring to bear all those capabilities. And I will be remiss, guys, if I didn't mention that a great deal of what we do as Quickparts today is less about the technology that we have within the 4 walls of our facilities, and it's much more about the people, the subject matter expertise, the ability to look at a designer's or an engineer's intent and iterate with them about all the different manufacturing processes that would bring their design not only to life but into full functionality. And the people, the subject matter expertise, the hundreds of incredible experts that have been with the company for decades is the ultimate, if you will, knowledge superpower that we give to our customers. That's kind of the superpower that companies that have been around for a long time and participated in building these manufacturing processes, scaling them, democratizing them. That's what we can provide for our customers as a superpower.
Yeah, so we may come back to the humans in the loop and the workforce challenges going on, but bring it all the way back from the moon to the ground, and another key issue in the industry, which is reshoring and bringing manufacturing back to America. Some proponents have said that additive manufacturing can play a key role in this. And even though you mentioned some of the applications for additive, there has been a lot of hype both about additive manufacturing and reshoring. From your perspective, what are the realities in terms of developing a feasible reshoring strategy, whether it's with additive or just traditional manufacturing?
Well, let me maybe peel the onion one more layer and start by, quite frankly, being very direct. The manufacturing world, most of us build our career in, and where you could forecast 12 months out with reasonable confidence, lock in your supply chain and optimize relentlessly for cost. That world is gone. It's not paused, it's gone. And it goes well beyond the intent of reshoring, nearshoring, or onshoring. And just to double click on that for a minute, today's manufacturers are navigating 3 colliding forces simultaneously, with or without onshoring. First you have this geopolitical fragmentation, what the likes of Ian Bremmer called the G0 world, where no single power sets the rules of global trade. Second is the supply chain brittleness, which we've been exposed to and continue to be exposed to since COVID and more recently tariffs. And the third is kind of the natural role of manufacturing forecasters, which is demand volatility that now moves faster than any planning cycle was designed to absorb. Uh, there's a lot of data to back this up. In fact, 81% of companies experience supplier disruptions in the past 2 years, and 62% classify supply chain risks today as high or very high. And these are not temporary signals, or I should say, this is not the noise. This is the signal. It's kind of the new baseline. So when you begin to ask yourself, how is onshoring doing, and should we do it or not, and what's going to be successful? To me, this is where I want to flip the narrative, because I'm fundamentally an optimist. You've known me for a long time. This disruption is, I think, a forcing function for long overdue transformation, fundamental transformation. And manufacturers who treat volatility as a design constraint rather than an inconvenience to be forecasted away are the one that are going to pull us ahead, because volatility is not a problem to be solved. It's a condition to be designed for. And companies who understand that distinction are the ones still running where everyone else is explaining a production hold, right, in production meetings. So does additive have a role in onshoring? Yes and no, because again, it's not about what tools can accelerate or enable reshoring. Injection molding should enable it. CNC machining should enable it. Die casting should enable it. And in fact, as we sit here, just in the last couple of months, we had to jump in and help one of our European automotive customers to recreate some of their tooling because they had parts that were not making it through the Strait of Hormuz. And, they didn't get up one morning 100 days ago planning on that. And in this particular case, additive wasn't the right tool, even though we had an additive facility within 35 kilometers of their facility. In another case, we had a medtech company that had tools in China, and with all the tariffs, decided that it's time to repatriate it. How do you do that? How do you pick up hundreds of tools and in a seamless and organized fashion move them into the United States and find good homes for those tools and able presses to be able to put it all together? So the discussion, guys, goes well beyond additive, and it goes well beyond just the notion of onshoring. Onshoring has to become part of the solution and part of solving for a new normal in which this volatility is only going to accelerate. And this is when we come back to one of the points that you've raised earlier of, what should boards, what should CEOs do in situations like this? They should require management to present a stress tested supply chain report, mapping single points of failure, 3 tiers and deep, and quantifying the revenue exposure of each. And if you board haven't seen ongoing, regular, monthly, and quarterly documents to this effect, your company is probably flying blind at full high altitude. And, these issues are not going to go away. And again, remember that pain is the forcing function for transformation. The question here is whether you transform before or after the disruption hits you.
Well, Avi, you mentioned disruptions and having to navigate all that stuff, and you mentioned pain. What are the other pain points that manufacturers are facing right now?
Well, I think today, first and foremost, is continuity, right? I mean, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, 100 days ago, nobody woke up in the morning and thought, today my automotive components are going to be stuck in the Strait of Hormuz. And I'm not even mentioning, the bigger issues of oil and gas and fertilizer and all the other disruptions. I'm kind of keeping it close to home to what we're talking about, advanced manufacturing. Nobody put that in their demand planning model. Nobody's ERP system flagged it, and yet that's exactly what happened about 100 days ago, right? To some of our customers, and it instantly cascades. Within a week, we started getting calls from customers that said, "I need components. My components are stuck, on a body of water, and there is no line in sight when I'm going to get them. What can I do? Can you reverse engineer my tools because I don't have all the documentations? Can you create bridge manufacturing for me?" And the only thing that is kind of sad in the story that I'm telling you is that none of these customers wants to do a case study about it, right? You can't mention them by name because nobody wants to publicly say, "Hey, I got caught with my trousers down." But it happens to lots of companies. And while it represents an enormous opportunity for companies like Quickparts to step in and be the hero of the day, it actually illuminates, fundamental planning and forecasting gaps that we want to be able to help companies solve long term, because we believe, based on all the data that we see supplying hundreds of customers, that this is absolutely the new normal. And so, the old model that was based on forecast accuracy and then on optimization is gone. The new model has to be designed for eliminating surprises. And I call this the shift from forecast accuracy to forecast tolerance. Because we have to stop trying to predict something that is unpredictable and start to build systems that absorb shock and keep on moving seamlessly.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you mentioned that additive wasn't a solution in this particular case. I mean, in some instance, you'd think that would be because it's the speed to market and a low volume specialty part. But I imagine there's a lot of different factors that weigh into such decisions. In terms of quality, cost, and availability, and of course, cost of goods sold modeling, which I know you're a big proponent of. How does that weigh into and look like in today's environment?
Yeah, I mean, look, additive has an important role in the future of manufacturing, and it has certainly a unique role in applications where additive is the preferred solution. If you look at some of the new kind of warfare solutions, or robotics, on ground and aerial drones and so on, additive is ideal for many of those applications, and in fact, it's being used extensively. If you look at some new materials within additive that more closely mimic the performance of injection molding plastics, And the emphasis here is on mimic because it doesn't fully replicate. Like the new material that we introduced a few months ago for SLS, Duracore, which performs much like production plastics. In areas like that, if you don't need an identical substitute, additive is the fastest way to go. In areas where you have a production automobile that have hundreds or thousands of designed and specified parts, the only way to mitigate is to completely replicate what is already designed, tested, and released. It's the same for aerospace, right? You can't break into an existing program that already specified all the parts and easily and turn on a dime and replace it with other processes. The strength, if you will, of companies like Quickparts is that we have all the processes in-house, and we have the ability within days to begin to produce even injection molding tools, including a new process that we launched a couple of months ago as well called Quick Mold, that allows us to make certain plastic parts on a complete injection tool within 3 to 5 days. That's how you complement and supplement the need for speed with the need to deliver, call it certified parts, the parts that the customer actually specified. So additive will increasingly have a role, is having a role, but that role is confined to A, performance requirements, especially on the material side, and B, what is and isn't allowed within existing production platforms and programs. And what is changing in all of that is that increasingly additive is being specified into new programs, and that's how it becomes more of a mainstream manufacturing tool.
Do companies realize, the executives realize that there's still some things that they're confined with additive, or do they think they can do things that they're just not quite ready for yet?
I think that increasingly, and you can see it in how companies are reporting their revenues and earnings, those that have reporting responsibilities, the public ones. I think increasingly companies realize that additive has its place and it has its constraints. And coming back to something that you asked before about cost of goods, which I like to get into maybe a little bit later if we have time. Cost today in many of these instances, especially when you have severe supply chain disruptions, like the ones that I mentioned, between geopolitics and tariffs and COVID and others, cost of goods is not the limiting factor here, because in kind of the greater sense, companies are going to, and they are already looking at cost of goods very differently. It's no longer the cost of the material plus parts plus tooling. It also has the cost of continuity, the certainty of supply, the ability to provide redundancy. And when you put it all together, and of course nowadays, tariffs and at what rate, and landed costs if you bring it, offshore. So it forces all of us to calculate cost of goods by adding a lot of new components into it, which makes the competitiveness of companies that are able to provide higher, because in a weird way we are decommoditizing some elements of manufacturing that used to be commoditized, like the search for the last 4 decades for the lowest cost producing zip code in the world, and who can do it for less. Now the question is, who can do it on time, who can do it with certainty, who could deliver in a G0 world, and so on. And so the key here is to build, as I said before, in a G0 world, your supply chain is only as stable as the most volatile political moment on the planet, and companies that accept that and design for it are the ones that will keep on shipping. And it brings me back to the whole point that what you need is forecast tolerance. Design systems that perform even when the forecast is wrong, even when your supply chain is fully disrupted. And that will include a healthy element of additive, but for the foreseeable future, it will rely on the ability to make traditional manufacturing more nimble and agile, and to have supply chain partners and solution providers like Quickparts that can quickly provide you with a quick mold, a new material, a reconstituted tooling fleet that can be deployed in new locations and help you overcome all the unforeseen obstacles that are becoming commonplace.
Avi, does all that apply to small and medium-sized companies? Are they having trouble overcoming that, or is it tougher for them?
I think that for smaller and mid-sized companies, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, for instance, if you look at how Apple works in supply chain, when they foresee any kind of a supply chain glitch, they have people that can get on an airplane and secure supply all over the world before the world knows that it has problems, right? I mean, that's kind of one extreme. And they spent years building dual sourcing into kind of the critical component strategy. After a single source dependency caused production delays going all the way back to the iPhone 4. Smaller companies don't have that level of resource. They don't have that level of infrastructure and talent sometimes available today, because they operate by nature, by design, on a shoestring. This is where companies like Quickparts steps in and becomes a force multiplier in terms of resource, experience, connections, planning, and providing the redundancies. Larger companies have the bench, have the means, have the resources to deal with it much more effectively. My kind of call to action to the larger companies is integrated into your governance and oversight at the boards and C-suite level, because if you don't, you're going to be caught with your trousers down.
Avi, before we started the broadcast, we were talking a little bit about AI and the pros and cons and of using it both personally and professionally. What role is it playing right now in what we're talking about?
Increasingly significant. I mean, remember that what separates experience from AI is the speed of computation and the ability to analyze massive amounts of data and make predictions. People like us who have the experience of decades of operation have good instincts. We have good gut feel. We can very quickly see and anticipate and look around the bend. What we can't do is look at all the moving parts in real time, 24/7, and ingest massive amounts of data and look at the patterns and the trends and interrogate it in ways that could yield new insights. So when you look at production planning and scheduling, when the goal is no longer to predict perfectly, the goal is to respond brilliantly, those are very different organizational capabilities that most manufacturers are still building the wrong one. And with AI, you have an opportunity to build the right one. And when you look at the exponential progression of AI and the ability to not only sift through, but prioritize, triage, and present options quickly, AI becomes, and at least for me, is a force multiplier of creating greater optionality for me in my business, for you in your business. And to me, in this day and age, especially with all the things that we are discussing, optionality is worth more than optimization in a world where the future keeps on changing, sometimes multiple times a day.
Besides AI, Avi, what other technologies do you expect to have a big impact in the next coming years?
Look, I think that first and foremost, I expect that AI will converge, and particularly physical AI will converge on the factory floor in the form of smarter machinery, right? So I foresee physical AI in injection molding. I definitely see it in 3D printing, additive manufacturing. I see it in the emergence of a new class of call it industrial grade humanoid robotics, because that's a safer environment to unleash humanoid robots on the factory floor than in the middle of the city, right? So those will naturally happen sooner. And so I see the way that hybrid manufacturing systems, not just on the brainy side, but on the execution, on the production floor side, whether you cut metal, inject plastic, add layers, or do all of it happening in a hybrid that benefits from the convergence of physical AI, better plastics and metals processing, and the automation that comes not only from workflow automation, but from workforce automation. And with the added benefit, by the way, of faster learning and training, because in a physical AI factory with additive, with subtractive and injection that is ubiquitously connected with infinite computational power, what you see is that once you teach one tool to do something, all the similar tools around the world learn the same skill or the same improvement instantly at the same time. And that is a game changer in manufacturing, where training and discipline and repeatability are key in terms of improving quality and outcomes.
Used effectively on the forecasting side, and talking about some of the issues that you had mentioned, and the importance of flexibility and getting senior management buy-in in forecasting. What percentage of companies are doing it right today and really incorporating that type of outlook?
I would say about 19 to 21%. There is a lot of work to do here to learn from the likes of Apple, to learn from the likes of Amazon, and how the Amazon supply chain team pioneered the demand sensing algorithms that recalibrate inventory positioning in almost near real time. And so this is where the opportunity is. The opportunity is to, this kind of change starts when you have a mindset shift, because the tools are available. We all need guides on the journey. This is kind of the role that people like me are playing. But the planning cycles are a mirror of your organization's confidence in its own ability to respond. Short cycles mean you trust yourself to react. Long cycles mean you're hoping nothing will change. And the day of long cycles is over. So, if your team is still measured on forecast accuracy today, you haven't made the shift yet. If your team is measured on its confidence to react to and respond on short cycles, then it means that you have gotten yourself to a point that you trust yourself to react, and that you have the building blocks that enable you to react. What tools you use at the end of the day, you should use all of them. If your company is not availing itself to all the manufacturing tools available to them today, they're not doing their job. If they're still locked into a single source in a faraway place, they're not doing their job. If they don't understand, call it what we call inside of Quickparts, the plastics continuum and the metals continuum, which typically starts with additive and then, goes into either CNC machining, die casting, precision, investment casting on the metal sides, and on the plastics goes from additive to quick mold to injection molding and so on. If companies don't understand those continuums and how to navigate between them, they need to. It's a huge opportunity. Yes, AI will play a role. Yes, strategy will play a role. Yes, we have a lot of cross-functional, multidisciplinary opportunities here. But it starts with, how do you change the lens, and how do you get to a point where you understand that this is absolutely the new normal, and it's the new normal for every product company. Unless you do it all in-house and you're fully vertically integrated. And even then, remember that if you are fully integrated in a facility in Detroit and you're making plastic parts all day long, the inputs into your resin are still likely to be coming through the Straits of Hormuz.
It's definitely a dynamic environment, and it brings us, excuse me, back to what we initially were talking about, is the complexity of the industry. And it's not going to change anytime soon, as you alluded to. Given all that's going on, both the good and the bad, and the new tools that are coming online, kind of big picture, what's your outlook for the rest of 2026 and going into 2027?
Well, my outlook is that, and I'll kind of bring it back to one of your earlier questions about reshoring. Reshoring isn't a political statement. It's a risk management decision. It might have been at one point in time a political statement. It's not. Reshoring today is a risk management decision. The smartest manufacturers are building domestic capability, not because it's cheaper, but because the cost of not having it when a crisis hits is incalculable. And my outlook for the remainder of this year is more uncertainty of even when some of the current geopolitics resolve, what's the next? Because we're absolutely in what Ian Bremmer calls a G0 environment, which means there is a decoupling of trading blocks. There is a rupturing of integrated global supply chains. And so the smartest companies, have to rebuild domestic capability, even if it costs them more, because the cost of a crisis is incalculable. And the coming back to what boards and leaders should do, they should ask for a production footprint risk matrix that maps revenue exposure by geography, regulatory dependency, and geopolitical sensitivity. And that should inform how they allocate capital decisions at the board level, not just operations reviews. And we need to think in this new world, which is decoupling maybe, 5 decades of globally integrated supply chains, that we need to think about what's the architecture that will win for us, as we move forward and want to reassert technology and manufacturing leadership globally. Is that regionally distributed with global intelligence is the architecture that wins, because we will never be able to fully reshore certain things, not in our lifetime. So we need to develop the kind of agility and nimbleness in supply chain with partners, with advisors, with experts, companies like Quickparts and others that can not only fill the gap, but turn these weaknesses into competitive advantages.
Certainly gave us a lot to think about, and a lot of talking points for future conversations. Avi, thanks for joining us. It's always a pleasure. For listeners that want to learn more about Quickparts, where should they go to?
Well, I welcome a continuation of the conversation. You can always come to www.quickparts.com, or you can find me and my colleagues on LinkedIn. We're all there. And Steve and Michael, I can't thank you enough. This was a real opportunity to have a meaningful and deep conversation about a topic that I know we're all passionate about. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Avi. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening today, especially those of you that listen live. And remember, the recording is always available on demand at advancedmanufacturing.org and on multiple podcast platforms and other social media channels. And please watch for the next episode of Advanced Manufacturing Live on June 11th.